Set, and we are live now. So, hey, folks, thanks for tuning in. So, this is a Sunday evening. I know it's like you guys will be like, can we listen to something more interesting apart from the generative AI buzzword that's happening? I think morning we had a generative AI session from Ashish. Evening, it's an event-driven architecture because I'm learning something about event-driven architecture. And I told, why not learn from an expert who is just working in that field as an advocate, and now he's seeing customers out there. He's now seeing use cases out there. So there are a lot of things that I have to learn in event-driven architecture, and there's a lot of things that you should learn in event-driven architecture. I think Giri has put up an amazing repository of future content as well. Like we are planning to go on with not just one, but also amazing set of content that we are planning to build. So this is the first part of that series where we are now trying to give you that intuitive understanding of how event-driven architecture makes a lot of sense when we are architecting something at scale. Forget Kubernetes, it's just the compute part of the puzzle, but still software has a lot of things that has to be negotiated from your side, built the right way, deployed the right way. And here I have Giri, who's just not going to give you just a sample code or a sample example of it, but he's going to explain you event driven architecture in a much more intriguing and an intuitive fashion so that you can adapt EDA the right way. And thank you so much, Giri, for being on the show. Means a lot.
Hi Vishwas, how was your Sunday? So I heard that you had a morning session as well. So definitely a busy Sunday, not the way you
Yeah.
wanted it, but good. Hey, thanks for having me on your podcast. And to the viewers, let me introduce myself. My name is Giri Venkatesan. I'm a developer advocate. That's my current role. I work for a Canadian company called Solace, a pioneer in event-driven architecture. So that tells you why I'm talking about event-driven architecture, right? So as Vishwas mentioned, I'm here to share the foundation, the thought shift that one has to kind of embark on from moving from the traditional way of thinking, programming, be it a developer or an architect, to this new way, right? I'll also explain why it may not be the newest way because we have been doing this for a long time, just that it got coined with this nice term, and there's a lot of benefit, and everybody's adopting to it. Yep.
Sure. Let's just start with the first question. We plan out a lot of five questions. I actually plan out 10 questions, out of which I try to compress all of it in five, but sometimes it's impossible. So that's where we are coming out with a series.
Yep.
So let's talk about first what really was that moment which really brought that event driven revolution into the market, like how the event driven architecture is transforming the traditional application design and development paradigm. Because altogether, when we see the history, it was always either you just send the data, wait for a while, there is an event, comes back something else. That's a payload that you have to just analyze on your side again, and a lot of things were happening. But today, world is so complex that things are moving so fast. So, what really led to the event-driven revolution, and also how is it actually catering to the needs of the world today?
Oh, fantastic question. If we can get this understood, then we very well know that what are the scenarios where this will make a difference, be it as a developer or an architect or as an enterprise. The simple thing is, it's nothing new. Event-driven architecture is an offshoot from the traditional integration. The integration per se is 20, 25 years old. When the day Java came about, we used to have this EAI and then became B2B, right? There were products that were built around this notion of integration. And then there are WS
Hmm.
standards, ESBs, everything is talking about the same thing. Just the differentiation now is two factors. One is the focus on asynchronous interaction. That means the components being able to work together without being blocked, right? That's from a technical perspective. But in a real world perspective, what would a business care for? Why should they invest in this EDA? Very simple. They want an agile and responsive business ecosystem. Benefit, increased customer experience, and then quicker time to market, serving the needs in a real-time manner, right? So the technical half and the business half kind of find a benefit on this EDA in a very tangible manner, right? So did I answer the question?
Yes, you answered that question. I think there is a lot of slides that are being planned. I think there is a lot of insights that we want to move around with. So I think, to me, there is a quiz game planned by you
Yep.
as a demo and a lot of other stuff. So there's a lot of things that's happening. I feel, to me, somehow, when I start to learn about this kind of a technology, I feel it's a buzzword at the end of the day. But
You
there are a
said it
lot
right.
of, yeah,
Sorry to cut you off. No, you said it right. It may sound like a buzzword, but every buzzword has a kind of a resonation with the reality, right?
got it.
There is a reason why they got the buzz. So EDA is nothing new. It has a huge buzz around this time. Now, if I had to be very specific, the EDA has gotten a lot more buzz because in the 2022 AWS reInvent event, the CTO, you may be familiar with the name Dr. Werner Vogel, his keynote speak was all about asynchronicity, nothing
Are
but
you
event-driven
sharing the
architecture.
screen? Are you sharing the
I,
screen?
I am. It's not
I think
appearing.
it's not changing. The slides are not changing, so that's why.
Oh no, I'm not changing the slides. I just wanted to set the stage. So the
All
notion
right,
is
go ahead with it.
event-driven architecture has been around for a long time, right? There are pioneers in this domain, Solus being one of them. But it got prominence because AWS started investing in the EDA both on its product stack as well as evangelizing the use of EDA in the cloud native side of things for the customers to use EDA and bring in this resilience, real-time responsiveness, and so on. So to top it off, the 2022 keynote address by Dr. Werner Vogel precisely captured this, right? When I talk about this analogy, just to help us understand what is this EDA and where does it come from, I will quote that as well. So make a note. If you get a chance, go back and see that keynote video on the AWS reInvent 2022. Pretty interesting. That'll kind of get you leapfrogged into a better understanding on this whole event-driven notion and event-driven architecture. So as you said, I have 5 or 6 slides, and I also have a quiz game where you're going to be playing, and that's going to be beneficial for others as well to understand this EDA, right? So talking about EDA, the first thing that we need to get our head around is this PubSub analogy. PubSub is nothing but publish, subscribe, right? So every technology, as it evolves, it comes up with a unique terms. And one other term from an EDA perspective is PubSub. And what is PubSub? It's pretty straightforward. In terms of interactions, we have been having all this point to point, and then request response, all those nice things, correct? Now, what's needed is basically a different kind of interaction that can decouple the sender and receiver, make them transparent, not knowing who's the sender, not knowing who's the receiver, and so on. So let's take a real world example. Let's say you walk into a pub with your friends, okay? And imagine you ordered a drink and it's not there on your table yet. So you end up in asking the server, hey, where's my drink? Where's my drink? How many times would you have to ask before you get the drink at the cost of not spending quality time with your friends? Right? So just what you want there is, I don't want to ask. Just give me my drink whenever it's ready. So don't ask me, we will give you. That's the publisher aspect of terminology, analogy, right? So you place the order, and when it is ready, it will arrive at your table. We take it for granted. I'm not introducing anything new. These are how the systems operate, right? But let's take another example, say restaurant. In a restaurant, typically there's a crew in motion all the time. People working in the kitchen, and then a bunch of people helping you take out the food and serve on the table, and probably a billing counter with one or more, right? This crew efficiently operates serving more than one person. I want to highlight this one word, more than one person. Just imagine the world where everything is synchronous. That means you do in sequence, and there's no concurrency, there's no parallelism. You place an order, and let's say it's a burger with the fries, right? And the order is collected, the chef starts making the food, maybe one potato stick at a time, because it is synchronous. When the fry is ready, he put it on the table, and then next fry, and then eventually the basket is full, and then it gets to your table. Now, are you happy? Yep, single customer got served, but you're not happy because it's inordinate delay in the whole process. And how about the other customers? This is basically first in, first out basis, right? So only when the customer is served, the next one is going to be kind of even responded to, and nobody is going to be happy. So the synchronicity, right, even though that makes sense, we can all relate to, doesn't work well in a real world scenario, right? So what we need is asynchronicity. You just place the order, it's like a machine, they make the fries, and then there's a bell, and then the server comes in, it has a table information, he goes serve, and he collects the order from the next person. It's kind of keeps going. It's a what we call as a choreography, right? Literally a bunch of people dancing together to the tune of this whole restaurant song. I hope this the analogy of the don't ask me, I'll give you, and this whole notion of doing things asynchronously, bringing in parallelism, that's the essence of event driven thinking. Okay, now in this process, I want to highlight one thing for sure: asynchronous versus synchronous, right? The key for asynchronous functioning is basically coming from the ability to choreograph streamlined operations. That's where you get your operational efficiency. It is not just for the restaurants, but also for the real world examples, like the way the online shopping cart process their orders, the supply chain works, the retail industry, banking, finance, the whole slew, everybody have to have some form of asynchronicity ingrained in their operational system, right? When we talk about asynchronicity, the benefits are immense: real time, resilient, and low latency, high volume, ability to serve more, right? But this all translates to event driven notion. This is how it started. So we got a nice name now: event driven architecture, and so on. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think people can understand why is there an PubSub analogy that we have to
Right.
start with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
That's the key. So let's say if we translate that, all the audience are being technical, right? So the first question is, I'm a developer, I'm an architect. What does it mean to me, right? Pretty straightforward. From the day we started programming, whenever we started, we always envisioned a system where the design is creating an ecosystem. Things are decentralized, small, well understood building blocks with local responsibility and autonomy, and the ability to concurrently run these processes or systems, whatever the way you look at it, and incorporated fault tolerance and simplicity, scalability, and then now you can put the star abilities. There are a bunch of characteristics that one would want to have when you build a scalable system, an enterprise level grade system, right? All these are good. So when you're building a system, you're going to choose which are critical for you, and then you start the design. But in this process, one thing that oftentimes gets overlooked, what are they? The asynchronicity in interactions and real-time responsiveness, right? The asynchrony is what I said as a stage as to why it is important, right? If we take it to a system design, we want systems and the system components to communicate with each other non-blocking way. Send a request and wait for a response. So what happens to you? You're going to be wasting all the resources that you're holding on to, starting from CPU cycles to whatever it is that you're responsible for. If you make it asynchronous, you make a request and you go back and do whatever you're good at, basically your business logic. When the response is ready, you get called and presented with a response. Then you continue whatever that you need to do, right? That is the asynchronous nature of interaction. Why it is important? So far, our thinking has been completely synchronous. If you look at the API, pretty much 99% of our solutions today are API centric. Of course, APIs also supports asynchronous manner, but it comes at a kind of a differential technology. The standard one that I'm quoting or comparing against is the REST API. You set in a request and you wait for the response. How do I say that? Your timeout is an error condition that you have to handle. You code your logic around that, or connection refuse, or connection the endpoint not found. These are all logical kind of failure scenarios, and you code the recovery logic in your API program, right? In the case of ADA, you don't have to worry about it. You just publish it. When the response is ready, you get it. All you need to focus is choreographing these systems to talk to each other. Basically, how do I know what I want as an event? How do I know what event should I send out to invoke this particular job or trigger something. Okay? The highlight is asynchronicity is a very important piece that has been overlooked or maybe underplayed, but now it's gaining prominence because of the true benefit of real-time responsiveness that comes to the table. And as with anything, you always have the two halves, right? So first thing is you always say, what is in it for me? So what I explained is from a technical perspective, but there's a business perspective as well, right? As a business, why should they invest in this EDA? If you look around the technology, every business, every enterprise is adopting to the new age technologies like cloud, multi-cloud, variants of all those things, and then this microservices and architecture, right? And the various form factors, starting from devices to IoT, sensors, and so on, right? So the technology, and of course, not to miss out on our AI and ML, right? All these things are changing the landscape, how the data is generated and how it is shared. This is where the real-time interaction takes precedence in a way that, because it directly translates to unlocking new business opportunities. I'll just call out a few when I get there. Any questions? Does it make sense? I just want to see it from a developer/architect perspective and then the business perspective. The
Got it.
convergence happens in a way that it really brings in value for both the segments.
Got it. So I think people, you guys can ask the questions in the comment section down here, so that any questions related to anything about architectural practices and other things we can obviously cover up here. And also feel free to DM us personally as well if you feel like, okay, I can't raise a question here, it might sound a little funny or something. Don't hesitate, please raise your questions or your DM if you wanted, so
Anytime.
that we can anytime.
I'll, yeah, I'll leave my coordinates as well. So feel free to DM me. I'll be happy to help you with the EDA ramp up whenever you're ready.
Sure. I think we can just go on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to kind of give you the real scenario. What are we talking about? When it comes to interaction, we are talking about two components exchanging information, right? So we very well know that the overall technology, the programming evolution, we have these two patterns mastered. Point to point, meaning I'm going to send a message to this system. This system has a location, IP, or whatever the things that you have, right? And then you also have request response. You don't want to just throw out in the open and send it to the endpoint and wait. No, I want a response back. So that's a request response. This part of the game is pretty clear to all of us, right? What's new is PubSub. PubSub is the one that's totally different from these two, simply because the interaction is intermediated by a component called broker. Okay, this broker brings a lot more than just the intermediation. It brings in quality of services that are very beneficial to the what do you call the business scope enterprises, as well as makes it easy for the developers and the architects to uncover new solutions. So what happens here is on the left hand side, what you're seeing is the components that are publishing events. Oh, by the way, I should tell you, in an API perspective, you always end up in saying client and server, and there's a requester, there's a responder. Those terminologies can be kind of morphs into something new today. It is publisher and subscriber, because a client can be both publisher and subscriber depending on what it is doing. So to that extent, to distinguish from an EDA perspective, events perspective, it is a publisher and a subscriber. A publisher publishes an event to a broker, and a subscriber subscribes to the event on the broker by specifying its interest. So that's the nomenclature we use. Now, when a subscriber subscribes, how does it say, what do I want? Right? If I have to tell Vishwas, send me an email, the first thing you ask is, give me your email ID, right? So everything has to have the context. In this conversation, Vishwas asking me email ID, the email ID becomes the topic on which we're going to exchange discussions and so on. And in the EDA perspective, this topic is basically the real-time context. Right? You send an event or a message on a topic. The topic could be log. Let's say we are talking about log messages. Log messages has three types, right? System log, log level, and timestamp. That could be your topic. And the body could be the actual text message. One example. The other one is when you are sending even a snail mail, you go by this hierarchical representation: country, state, city, and then your society name or street name, and then the door number, right? All these things put together, what is more important in order to identify who should be the recipient, or who on what topic you are publishing or generating this event, than just, okay, here's the content, just go and give it to somebody. No, the conversation happens at the context of a topic. That's the central theme when it comes to brokered interaction between publishers and subscribers. And of course, there are other quality of services broker brings to the table, such as queue. Basically, you want to say that the decoupling is one of the things, right? How do I decouple? Even if I'm not there, I want all the events to be collected and uh, presented when I become online, right? So because we are living in a kind of a microservices world. A service crashes. So just because the service is crashing, what happens to the business process? Would we throw it away? No. These events could be put in a persistent store, what is called as a queue. And when this service comes back up, it can start dequeuing these events on its own term, on its own time, and execute the logic. This is where we see the decoupling. Uh,
I think there is one
does that,
question.
sure.
I think Amrita is asking, is there any change in SLAs and SLO in case of an EDA? So I think that's a great question. We can take this question as well.
Sure, it's a fantastic question. So in terms of SLA, just like API world, how we have contract, right? The contract defines, exposes the interface to both the parties on which they build the program, and there's an endpoint, and you just send a request and you expect a response. The next level, if you dig deep, it is the payload schema, right? But when it comes to EDA, the first part is pretty clear. You are publishing an event on a topic. There is no contract. It directly comes down to the business logic that you are executing. You want to look up an address. So you might be publishing on a topic, say, look up address and then give some details. There could be a service provider who's address lookup service provider. That could be a service subscribing to these events. So in terms of contract, it comes down to how these components set their requirements on the broker. That will be like a publish permission and subscribe permission.
Got
Okay.
it.
And the next thing is, what is in the payload? That's almost similar to what we have in API, the schema. When you're publishing an event, you're saying that I'm publishing an event on this topic, and based on the event, I mean, probably that's a little out of scope for this discussion. We are in the very beginner's stage level. There can be a schema registry associated with that. So if I'm publishing on this event, the payload has to conform to this schema. The same information would be kind of made available to the subscriber. So when the subscriber receives the event, he knows how to interpret the payload. So that's somewhat similar to what we have in the API world, right? So the SLA and SLO comes down to the permissioning scheme and governance schemes that you define on the broker, which brings together these publisher and subscribers.
Got it. I think it's a good question that she asked. Thank you so much, Amrita. And okay, it's coming out again. So wait, I'll just have to just navigate to that question. Okay, Partha is asking, is the reactive programming and event-driven architecture synonymous? I think this is a great question. I think
It
you can
is.
answer this question.
It is. It is. The reactive manifesto kind of a verbatim sounds like EDA. There's no question, right? Reactive programming, but it's reactive program is a construct guideline. You can choose to implement it in any way you want, any language you want, and so on. But EDA is more a structured approach to things. It's like a enterprise framework that makes it easy for both developers, architects, and the businesses to build on. Because when it comes to enterprise requirements, the governance, security, all of these things are very critical, more than the benefits that you see, right? So put together, EDA kind of comprehensively addresses this, and reactive programming is a concept. So, but technically, they can be equated.
Got it. Perfect. I think if you have any doubts, queries, and questions, please feel free to drop down the questions here so that we can address them chunk by chunk. If we don't know the answer, of course, we'll go back and look back at the solutions that we can give to you. I think over to you, sir. You can just start
Sure.
with it.
So the key thing is, I want to highlight this one notion. The event-driven architecture, the first word is event, right? We all know what an event is. Just to formally introduce it, it's a snapshot of a state. Could be of your system or a record or anything that you care about in terms of stateful scope of things at a point in time, right? So if let's take a simple example, a record, it gets updated every second. That means it's going through state change every second. And if you were to capture this, right, every second you will have an event generated based on the record state. It is not going to be same as the next event or the next event. Each one is distinct because it captures a state at a point in time. To that extent, we can say that it's immutable. That's very important, right? And also, I want to call out, now we are talking about data, state, right? Intrinsically, it has a value because that's the one that drives the business logic on the other side. What need to be done, what need to be executed, and so on. But I want to call out there's one more dimension to this value, what's called as a time value, right? What do I mean by that? An event generated 10 minutes back, if for whatever reason it reaches you now, is it still useful to you? Does it still have business relevance? If you were to ask this question, your answer would vary. For some businesses, any event is better than no event. Sure, that's good enough. But for some businesses, it could be like a stale event because things might have changed. Let's take the example of capital markets, right? Where a security being traded, and every single trade data is valuable, but the most important one is the last traded information because that is the one that determines the price, the volume, and other things that you would have your decision-making systems operate on. So this is what is referred to as a time value. I mean, it is kind of a coined by Gartner, and this time value is super critical when you kind of look at an enterprise perspective where you want real-time interaction between the systems. How do you get this time value realized? If you look at the olden days, we used to do things like extract the data on a nightly basis or weekly basis and run a report and then present the report. Everybody's happy, but you very well know that those days are gone. We want the data now, and we want the insights now, and we want to action it now. Everything is now, now, now. That means the time has taken equal precedence on the data, right? The only way to accomplish this is capture this data as they change and set them as event streams. That's the only way. That's why this whole notion of event-driven, event-based, event, the thinking, event-based design, all those things revolves around this one singular notion. Making data available in real time, how fast, how soon, and to the right recipients. And second point I want to call out is it's not something that's going to live on its own. The entire IT ecosystem is managed by the IT custodians. There's DevOps, there's administrators, and there are various roles. And of course, the line of business heads. There is one more component to one more perspective to this. In the olden days, the enterprise would have various systems, right? The IT acted as a data custodian, basically the state priority. When a data changes, it is the one that needs to determine who it should be routed to. No, the implementation aspect is through a broker or a ESB or something else. Let's not worry about that. But the IT policy and the IT structure would be caring to share this state change to right recipients. So they acted as a data custodians, basing their work around this state priority. State change, these are the systems that need to know immediately. What I'm saying is the workflow model, right? But today, once you make your data available as event streams, you can view the entire IT as a nervous system where events simply flows anywhere and everywhere. When I say anywhere and everywhere, it is simply based on the PubSub or the permissioning. That's the custodian the IT becomes responsible for, right? Now, what do you gain by that? Now the priority shifts from the data or the state to basically your decision-making ability. Every system that gets data eventually has to execute some business logic. That business logic could generate some actionable insight that need to be known or exposed to other systems. So you see the effect, right? Inventory going low in a supply chain perspective or a retail perspective, it is of critical importance for the distributor to refill in time. Otherwise, your store will not have the item replenished for many days. We have seen those things. But today, every segment is looking to capture this real-time information and act on it. So the IT plays a huge role, and it's a added responsibility aiding this decision priority. Just want to highlight that. Okay. Now, from a technical perspective, it's pretty straightforward. We want to build a decoupled development environment so that teams can independently build, operate, and collaborate. And this entire thing, the name of the game is scalability. That is possible only when you have a decoupled environment. Otherwise, you will end up in building either a micro monolith or a huge monolith, and then you will have to scale at the monolith level. I mean, what I'm saying is no, it doesn't even make sense. So the scalability is key thing. That's easily accomplished when you have this kind of a well-defined solutions or services, and in that, add the responsiveness aspect. No, decoupled and responsiveness. That's the EDA, event-driven architecture, right? Why do we call it an architecture? At the end of the day, as programmers, we all know we operate our thought, our solution, everything around this notion of patterns. If something we see repeating, then we call it a pattern. So we have plenty of patterns. On that basis, event-driven architecture is a architectural pattern. And in that, the key factor is the publish subscribe, which is a communication pattern. That's all it comes down to, folks. If you choose to build your own broker today, you can do that. You may very well kind of implement a PubSub system serving some limited number of systems. But the moment you start wanting for other value-added services that is typically of enterprise scale, then real problem starts. That's why it's like a build versus buy. You can build your own broker. Nobody's stopping, and it's doable. But the quality and the guaranteed quality, the other aspects of enterprise class services comes in when you opt for brokers like Kafka, RabbitMQ, and even our own Solace. Okay, so just to highlight or repeat, event-driven architecture is an architectural pattern built on this publish subscribe as a message exchange pattern. And of course, doesn't mean that it doesn't support the point-to-point and request. It supports all the three. And as there's few more to it. So that's something that we can talk about. I just want to highlight one thing here. The traditional thinking is always pull-based. You send a request, then only you can expect a response. If you don't send in a request, you don't get a response. And everybody is happy about the two. That's a pull-based mechanism. That's what the REST API offers. And probably even if you go back in time, the other techniques that we had, like RPC, socket-based communication, all those things are built on this basis. They're all pull-based interaction. Now the paradigm is completely shifted. When you talk about EDA, it's a push-based mechanism. All you got to do is the first time you register your interest. What is that you want? What topic that you want to subscribe to? That's it. The broker owns up the responsibility to push these events to you whenever they become available in real time. That's what I started out saying that, don't ask me, I'll give you in a pub, right? That's exactly what event-driven architecture is. The real benefit that you're getting is also something, from a technical perspective, you would understand the location transparency and decoupling. This goes hand in hand. If you're invoking an API, you need to know where the API endpoint is, and you need to make sure that the API endpoint is available. If it is not available, obviously, you know what you're going to get. 404, 400, 503, the whole slew of HTTP fun codes, right? But in this case, that's not true. You publish an event, you don't even know who are the subscribers. You don't need to know, because you created your architecture in a way that the publisher publishes events based on what logic is built on the publishing side and what's the outcome of it. And then you build subscribers based on their business requirements. You subscribe to the topics relevant to that business logic. And the broker is a central piece that kind of collates this and connects the dots. So they're completely decoupled, and they don't need to know about each other. You can publish an event, you don't need to know who are the subscribers, right? And then from the subscriber perspective, even if they're offline, they can opt the data to be queued, persisted, so that they will be delivered to them, which is called as a guaranteed delivery. These notions are completely alien from an API perspective, right? APIs are synchronous. If you want to invoke asynchronous, you have to go hoops to get that done. It's not impossible, but not built for that because it's HTTP based, which by definition is synchronous, and it has its own kind of corners that cannot be cut. EDA on the other side is completely asynchronous, but you can make it synchronous, right? So right tool for the right job doesn't mean that one is going to displace the other. They can collaborate and coexist, bringing out the best for the enterprise, for the business. Okay. So any comment, Vishwas? What do you think?
Yeah, I think most of the times it's always told that no architecture was built without a purpose. Like
Hmm.
the architecture built at that point of time was supposed to serve that purpose, and it served it. And now, as an engineers, it's duty of us to make sure that our architecture practices evolve, not to complain that okay, we had a very bad, unpredictably slow or an unsteady or an unstable architecture. It really
Mhm.
solved the problem statement, helped me run the business, but now it's beyond it. So we have to think beyond whatever we are able to capture at one given point of time. I think the last pointers that you told about, let's not cringe about okay, this is the way the request goes in. let's
Mhm.
just let's just programmatically solve it, and let's just visualize it even better and perfectly before we even productionize it. I think that was the kind of a pointer that you told about it. I think
No,
that
no,
makes
well
a
said.
lot of sense.
Well said. I think you succinctly put it. Here's one place where the architects can play a vital role. You know what I'm talking
Mm.
about? They have the EDA is a domain where the power of the outcome is most likely in the hands of the architect. It's not just about choosing the EDA, implementing the EDA, putting the right things at the right place, the governance, security, PubSub, and then the basically, orchestration is very easy, right? You whiteboard it, you code it away. Choreography is not the same because it's like a in the sports bar you will have these pinball machines, right? Once the ball gets dropped, which direction it's going to go, so unpredictable. Something similar is quite possible here, but it is going to be based on the subscriptions and the triggers, the flow that you have defined that essentially represents this choreographic kind of a dance of services, dance of components, the way you say it. Yeah, fair enough. Um, there's a business perspective also. I don't want to miss out on that. It's not just a build for technical people. Technical people would love EDA and easy to understand, easy to adapt. At the same time, business cares for the return on investment. Otherwise, they wouldn't
Mm.
invest, right? This is simply, I kind of call out a few of the things. Agile adaptation. Change is the constant, right? So as an enterprise, you may be a non-technical company, but you will have a heavy-duty enterprise infrastructure, right? How do you keep it up to adapt to changes that are coming in? Maybe you acquire a company that has a different kind of ecosystem. How do you integrate with that? Or maybe you are geographically expanding, right? So all these possible permutation combination would throw a fit on the existing IT. It cannot be stale. So adapting to changes, both from business perspective and technology perspective, EDA makes it less painful. Of course, it comes with its own challenges. I'm not going to hide that, but it makes it less painful and more suited for this kind of a ad hoc adaptive aspect from an architectural perspective, and business loves it because that's what the CIO asks for. If I do this, what do I get as a tangible benefit, right? The next point is innovation catalyst. Today, can you imagine IoT and sensor playing a role in retail segment in an in-store experience? Can you think of anything, Vishwas? Just curious.
I think payments is one of an example, right? The card which
Fantastic.
we swipe, it's a smartphone at the end of the day, but it's converted into a different form factor. So I think a lot of
Nailed it.
interactions are happening.
Nailed it. Right? Now take that and translate it. A swipe of a card generates an event, right? It hits the broker, and then it is subscribed by the fraud check system. And then if it passes, it publishes a different event that goes into maybe credit check system, and then
Mm.
fulfillment, blah blah. Entire thing decoupled, right? You're somewhere in a corner. Your swiping of a card can trigger off something that creates a choreographic event flow. At the end of the day,
Got it.
right? Now, let me tell you one more interesting thing. There are some notion called as a digital tag, which is getting popularity in the Europe, right? The price tag is a digital tag. You see an item, typically we see a sticker in at home in India, right? Now it's a digital tag. You know what the power that you gain with that as a business? If you have a perishable food item, you have too much of it, or maybe surplus didn't sell, you want to get rid of it before the end of the day. So how do you do that? Reduce the price. And reducing the price is not like a one store, with the 500 store chain, or whatever the region specific, right? You want a controlled manner, tweak the prices to optimize your business value, either for the day or a long run or short run, whatever it is. Imagine triggering that kind of event and this digital display showing latest price. This is IoT, this sensor based mechanism. So my point is, innovation, it continues to happen on all the segments. Adopting to this is going to be easy when it comes to EDA, because EDA can support multiple protocols. It is built, basically, at least from a Solid's perspective, the broker can talk protocols like MQTT, AMQP, JMS, REST, and then proprietary protocols and WebSockets. I mean, that's good enough to give broader coverage, right? So imagine the broker from the HQ, you just say that I want to reduce the price of this perishable item by 20%. Boom, one event gets broadcast to every store wherever you're targeting, and the digital price changes. Maybe you will cut your losses, right? And the next one is from a resource perspective, efficient resource utilization. From a technical perspective, the scaling, right? You have a containerized version of everything, either as an individual service or as a group of services. Now, with EDA, we can conjure up some new options, not scaling a container level, rather at a specific service level, which requires a definite scaling. Maybe it is too compute intensive or slow, and so on. Right? I wouldn't be able to go into detail because it requires a lot more time. And the result is the customer experience. Let me talk about the customer experience, right? For example, we all take a flight now and then, right? How often we have felt the pain of a flight getting rescheduled, but you are getting to know only after reaching the airport? Many times. Next one, the gate changed, but you're in the other wing. Now you have to run in 5 minutes, right? There are so many instances that can throw you off as a customer, creating a bad experience, right? Now, these are all existing processes from an airline or the check-in management perspective. We are just bringing in a tweak. When a passenger checks in, now you know he's inside the airport. Anytime there is a gate change, don't just rely on the public announcement system. Send him a message, maybe through the app or maybe through an SMS, right? So they're being responsive, being in touch with them. And by the time you disembark, maybe your airline supports mileage, rewards program. Hey, your tier is upgraded to LI tier. You can get 20% discount on your next ticket. So these are business avenues. The enterprises knew, but they didn't have a mean to accomplish it. Can you imagine using APIs to accomplish this? The traditional thought process. Simply impossible, if not, not the right tool, right? Event-driven thinking, event-driven design, and event-driven architecture makes it easy. So on the same time, I'll also say that you don't have to re-architect anything. Just, there's a strangler pattern is something that you might have heard of. Anything that you're adding new, slowly fork off into the new realm that you want to adapt to. So any new services you add, make it event-driven. There's one fundamental thing that you need to do is all the legacy and other systems that you have in your enterprise, expose the data. Doesn't matter where it's coming from, legacy system or other ESBs or your traditional databases. When the change happens on those systems at the data level, make it available on a broker. Expose it to the EDA infrastructure. Rest will be very powerful. Right? Seamless collaboration, obviously, that's one of the greatest benefits. So at this point, I want to bring in your favorite trivia game. Can we?
Let's do it. I think before going
Any
to
questions?
I think there are no questions. I think you are breaking down everything into chunks. Basically, this is the link which I'm sharing with you. It's a Death Star architecture approach, right? Whatever he told about there can be anything that can go wrong. So
Mhm.
there is obviously a Death Star approach that we always give. So the star that you are seeing today, the same thing that happened with respect to Amazon Prime Video. They're moving from serverless to monoliths back again. It was basically a rigged up architecture which they thought it's more efficient, but there is a Death Star approach that is always given, that you should be able to move out of anything that you have rigged up in a very seamless fashion. I think this is an amazing place that you have to go back and check all the links out. I think it's just Death Star architecture. You will be able to get this thing
I'm
out
more
here.
curious. I'll definitely check it out. But I relate to what you said. Nobody can be signed up for something for life. You got to
Yes.
leave room for adapting to new things. I was surprised when people were moving back to monolith. The white paper that came about, right? Why Prime Video? That was fantastic. But obviously, it's an opinionated one. We can debate about it, but it is quite a possibility. I'm not surprised at all. So I always
Yeah.
look at the world as a mix of things, right tool for the right job. Everything can coexist. As architects and developers, it's in our hands, right? The more the investment
Yeah.
you make today, that's going to give you return tomorrow. I mean,
That's
in a way to
true.
say,
I
right?
think I think Kubernetes might go away 10 years down the line. Or else Kubernetes might not exist 5 years down the line. Because you still deal with microservices of Kubernetes now. Your etcd is a microservice, your master nodes, worker nodes are another microservices on their hand, APIs are another microservices on their hand. So you already dealing with complexities. Probably there will be a day where they'll feel like, what, we need to go back and re-architect Kubernetes. So anything can go out. So you have to have an approach of
Quite a
going back
possible.
to something. Yes. I
That's
think,
why
yeah, let's.
in the event-driven world, I like one term, that's called as event sourcing. What it
Yeah.
simply comes down to? Capture the data at the source, right?
Mm.
So the CDC is another popular term we all know, change data capture. So these are not new. Now they all come in handy when it comes to adopting event-driven architecture. Liberate the data, make it available, and you build your event-driven ecosystem. So like that, I take your point. Kubernetes or anything that we know is stable, kind of a repertoire for architects and developers today may go away or may morph into something else totally. But you need to
Yes.
have a story for integration. Guys, at the end of the day, I want to underline this one word. You can call whatever you want. Integration is the name of the game when it comes to creating collaborative systems, right?
Got it.
And then in this cloud, private cloud, multi-cloud, on-prem. I mean, there are always these things will come in and create uh, I wouldn't use the word mess. I'll be cautious. Rather, increase the complexity, for some benefit. And then we have no choice but to live with that and then plan our strategy for entry, exit, or coexistence. It's fun, As long as the returns are there, the game is good. That's what business
Yep.
cares for. Yep.
That's
So
what any architecture on that point of time cares about. All
that's
right,
true.
let's go on with the game so that you can intuitively understand, okay, this is where events are making an impact in our every single day. Like, this is just a simple quiz application
Yeah.
which has rigged up, and you guys can start seeing it right
Yeah.
now.
So what I'm doing, which was I've already mentioned this to you, right? We know uh, there are good understanding of EDA with majority of the people. At least for the past 4 years, this has picked up quite a steam, and many of us in the audience also might know very well what event-driven architecture is. But
Got it.
in this journey of learning what is event-driven architecture, they could have been misled to make some assumptions or misunderstandings. So what I'm doing is, my colleague has written a couple of blogs on this myth busting. I just took it and turned around as a quiz. And by the way, the app that you're seeing, it's basically a web application built using JavaScript, Node.js. But behind the scene, it uses MQTT protocol to talk to Solace Broker. Solace Broker is an EDA broker that I chose to build this application with. So everything that's happening here is real time. And unfortunately, I would love to have you participate in this game, maybe in the next session. But right now, just as a demo, what I'm going to do is I'm starting the controller. The controller is ready with the game, and I'm going to proxy Vishwas. So what I'm doing is
Sure.
I am logging as a game console member. with Vishwas as the name. And you can see here already, this is all about sending questions from the controller in a timely manner to the participants. And the participants will get these questions and they choose an answer. The answer goes back to the controller and the game console, where it gets aggregated, the score is computed, and then the leaderboard is built and it gets broadcast to this one. So big picture is it's a multiplayer, multi-trivia game platform. Okay, I use the word big word platform. It's not exactly a platform, rather a gaming application, right? So you would have seen Kahoot, right? The closest one. And you can have any number of Kahoot quiz games going in parallel, and each one has a
Got it.
dedicated code, and the participants within the game will interact only with each other. Same principle, but all the interactions are through EDA. So what you see here is an event, right? When the player Vishwas joined the game, he sent saying that, hey, what are the games available for me? And he got the game information. And then he said, I'm going to join this game. So you can see, just watch out this space. Every interaction is through publishing or subscribing to events. So on the controller, I'm going to click on set. This will send out an invite to all the participants. Okay. So on behalf of Vishwas, I'm going to say join.
Got it.
Join the game. You can see here in the dashboard, there's one participant. There are 10 questions, each carrying 15 seconds threshold. And let's go. So
Got
Vishwas,
it.
you need to give me what do you think could be the answer
Right
to this.
answer.
And
I'm
this
no
is all,
expert in these stuff, but yeah, I will just try to give as much as I can relate
no,
to
no
or
worries.
understand to.
What do you
Using
think? Is
asynchronous is processing done later. I think it's false.
any, oh, okay, I'll take your answer. But you're right.
Yeah,
Asynchronous
using
is not
asynchronous.
about later. It's about the way how you interact. Okay,
Yeah,
next one.
API so or only it can be synchronous, asynchronous, so it can be false.
Good. Because EDA can support both
Both,
synchronous and
yeah.
asynchronous. Right. As I was
All
clicking, you can
right.
see on the left-hand side, real-time answer, broadcast, and getting. Okay, what's the answer here? Event broker is the
An
only thing that
event-driven
you need
broker
to.
is no. It can be anything.
No, it's a lot more than broker. The
Yeah,
paraphernalia that goes to get your EDA built. Exposing APIs on our legacy app or monolith makes it event-driven. No, you just expose an API. Event-driven requires a lot more than that. The EDA
yeah.
design, the topic nomenclature, permissioning. Okay, I'll go into detail. Designing EDA involves a lot of
Yes,
moving parts. Sure?
yes,
Excellent.
yes.
You got your
Of
basics right.
course.
No, no, you're right.
I think we have to. EDAs and high throughput. Yeah, it can be any quantity.
So true or false?
False, false.
Good choice. It is true. The real-time requirement is not dependent on the scale. Whatever that you want to send across, I want it in real time, asynchronous. That's the bottom line. EDA could result in
All.
a pinball machine effect.
I think you have to just explain it so that
Okay,
I don't
uh,
understand this
I'll
again.
choose the answer. Oh shit, I missed. That's okay. The point is, I'll come back to this. Please remind me. Streaming
Yeah, yeah.
solutions only implemented using Apache Kafka. Many of you might know Apache
False.
Kafka. It is a wonderful broker, open source, but there are other brokers as well. I'll also touch upon this. 2 points I need to remind myself.
That's actually false.
Carry it.
Yeah.
You don't need
Okay.
to. That's what I was highlighting, right? You don't need to redo everything just because you want EDA. You can
Yeah.
incrementally make your system event-driven. Perfect. EDA can prevent cascading failures. At least this one should be familiar with the architects.
Yeah. I think EDAs can obviously
Yep.
prevent cascading failures. Yes.
That's the difference between choreographed versus orchestrated event flow. Right? Very good.
Yes.
You did very well. So only one we missed, it's my fault, and one you got wrong, but no worries.
Yeah.
So if you notice, go down here, just look at the events that got exchanged, getting rank, anything that I do here, just refresh of this performance, it sends out an event to query scorecode by Vishwas, and then the controller sends the response scorecode Vishwas, right? And this calculation, get rank, this is from the controller perspective, pretty much the central theme, how these guys are collaborating and interacting. And this one is just for Vishwas, what kind of events he published, what kind of events he received. And it also has a fun part. Hello, you can see here. It's a
Got
chat,
it.
right? So there are a lot of things, gamification or game kind of a thinking where the real-time responsiveness is key. That's the point I took upon. I said, okay, why don't we build something simple that can be both fun as well as, kind of bringing out some discussion point. So the 2 points that we talked about, pinball effect is nothing but, I was talking about in the sports bar and all, when the ball drops, you don't know which direction it's going to go depending on the notches, right? Something similar when you publish an event, you don't know who the subscribers are,
Got
right?
it.
So it can create its own flow based on what you have kind of configured as a governance policy, the PubSub permission, access control. That's where the broker makes a difference, right?
Got it.
The next one I talked about was um, cascading effects, right? So if you were to have an orchestrated flow, right, one API invoked, that API in turn invokes three other APIs. Let's assume that the second API fails. Now imagine the mess that you need to deal with in terms of rollback, commits, what state your application is going to be in. It's unpredictable, right? When
Got
it
it.
comes to event, it's a little bit easier. If this service fails, you won't even invoke the third and fourth. The cascading can be stopped at the source of the problem. In a microservices architecture, this is very, very handy. Again, there's one benefit, but obviously building your microservices to be event driven is another exercise for another day. Okay. That's pretty much it from my side. I am open to let you
Question.
share your thoughts and probably have questions if there are any questions.
Sure, folks. I think please do ask your questions in the comment section down here. And I think we can discuss something about how a pinball effect is taken care. And probably you can give example of how an ML space can really leverage something with event driven architecture. Might not be event driven architecture because we still batch the data, we still bucket the data out there, and there's a lot of thing that goes behind when we think, okay, this is what I want from my architecture and this is how my machine learning model APIs are going to be hit. So you
No,
can just give us some examples right now.
sure, sure. I'm no authoritative expert on the domain that you are referring to, AML. I'm a learner. No, I've been spending time on that. I'm not there, but I can visualize a scenario. So the power of AI is all about how up to date it has information, right? So the best example is ChatGPT. Till few months back, it was blatantly coming forth and saying that I have data only till 2021. It's constrained, right? What stopped it? I mean, they might have chosen to stop it for beta purpose and so on. But if you choose to make such a language model, a self-learning one, A, you need to continuously make data available, right? B, where is the data coming from? How are you going to get it? That's where the notion, how soon do I want to get that to the language model for retraining purpose? So we're not talking about one message, sporadic message in a second or a minute. No, we're talking about voluminous data. Recently I kind of read that, ChatGPT is going to open crawlers. Just like what Google did, it would have the ability to crawl and collect information. Just imagine the volume of data it might end up in producing. And all these data need to be fed to this learning engine, training mechanism. So collecting data, making the data available in real time so that your engine is up to date. That's the
Got it.
part EDA can play a major role. Again, I'm hypothesizing here. I would refer to the experts in the domain, but I see it as a potential use case. But let me talk about the other domains. Smart city initiative in India. We know that, right? That we
Hmm.
have 24 smart cities, and at least for us, what it comes down to as a first phase, installation of this CCTV cameras in important places, and then tracking buses, public transports, and other related, smart metering of water, electricity, right? These are all phase one of things, but there can be a lot more. There also, the amount of data that need to be collected, the amount of data that need to be collated and then pushed back. You see that? We are talking about delving into the sensors, IoTs. Connected car is a related example. What's happening in your car is continuously monitored, and these decision systems can help you. Hey, your brake is on the verge of losing. It's only 20% good, so you need to done that too. the nearest fuel station is 2 kilometers away, you're running low, right? But for me, the most interesting one is the supply chain. Who would have thought supply chain could benefit from EDA? But it happened. When the Suez Canal issue happened, so many ships and containers were blocked, and it created a rippling, rippling effect of all the supply chain is disrupted. Right? There was only one business that survived that smartly. Basically, it was able to plan and then reroute their requirements to somewhere else, and then manage the expectation throughout the supply chain. That's Unilever. The simple reason is they were able to get this data of their ship movement, container movement in real time. They built business logic around that to kind of reroute their, or rather, manage their supply chain requirements in real time, right? And the retail floor example I told you, right? When you walk into a store, you are not finding an item, but it's available online. So you turn that opportunity into kind of making the customer engage, having it door delivered. So you increase the customer experience, be present, right? So there's a banking and fintech. I don't even have to start. Everything is real time. Starting from our SMS notification on a debit transaction versus credit transaction. Hello, did I lose you?
No, no, you are here. You are
Okay.
here.
So all those things are great. The another best example is the whole fintech revolution. It is built on the power of real time, right? If anything, there's a delay. There's nothing. People would drop the apps like in hot potato. It is so real time that people get hooked onto it. They trust it. So from our GPay examples to Paytm, everybody has some form of EDA in their game plan. With that, I yeah, this is the future which talked about. Serverless computing will tremendously benefit. Edge computing is another interesting case. Nowadays, pretty much all the enterprises are trying to get to this. Get the operations closer to the source because the data is already made available, right? And that requires tremendous effort in terms of I wouldn't use the word re-architecture, rather designing systems to uh, kind of a move to the edges. EDA plays a pretty kind of a beneficial role in that one, making data available and then choreographing or orchestrating this entire interaction on the edges. Blockchain, always, it's a beneficiary of so many technologies. EDA can definitely get there. Smart contract execution, invocation, and distributed ledger management. So pretty much, EDA is like an agnostic technology of any segment or any other technology that requires this real-time responsiveness, high volume, low latency transactions. Okay? Moving data at best speed. All right. That's it, Vishwas. I want to close out with this. This we kind of took it as an introductory opportunity. If time permits, help me out with one more session where I will do deep dive into kind of use cases, right? And probably talk about the real PubSub in action, right? I'll take that
Got it.
opportunity and do a deep dive. Right now, I didn't want to kind of scare people with this is
Yeah, yeah.
level.
I'm also learning it. I'm also learning it. I'm no expert in EDA because I've not never worked at that scale. It's always that understanding as a guy who is navigating in the industry. You need to understand. Okay, this is where we are moving towards, and how can we move the right way? It's through the podcast like this, or else the live shows like this. So I think it's an opportunity for me to learn. It's an opportunity for the audience to learn a lot. And thank you so much, folks, for being on the show Sunday
I know.
evening 7 p.m. and it's been a good journey that we had. Morning there was an amazing session. Now also people were very interactive in terms of asking right questions. I think that was pretty good, and thank you so much, Giri, for being on the show. Means a lot. And of course, happy to have you any given point of time. And these are the digital coordinates of Giri Venkatesan. So please make sure that you follow him on all the social media handles. I'll just I'll just have to just tag him in the LinkedIn post, so he will be just there available to you any given point of time. Ask your questions, ask any number of queries. He'll be happy to answer that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Vishwas, for having me. And I have been an admirer of your depth and breadth on various technologies. So I also learned few things based on your past podcasts. I appreciate your continued contribution, and thanks again for giving me this opportunity. Right? You have a great Sunday.
Sure.
Take a break. I'm going to party.
Yeah, yeah. I am also about to go for it. So thank you so much, Giri. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
folks. Let's just end the broadcast. This is Vishwas Nayan signing off from the show.